The summer Rosa Delgado turned 17 was the same summer she lost everything and decided to take it all back. Her father, Eduardo Delgado, had spent 23 years building something from nothing. Acre by acre, he had turned a dusty patch of West Texas land into a proper cattle ranch. 40 head of Angus, a working well, and a small farmhouse with a rusted tin roof that sang during rainstorms. It wasn't much by Beaumont County standards, but to Eduardo, it was everything a man could want. Then Clayton Hurst walked in. Hurst was the kind of man who wore expensive boots to muddy places. Always dressed sharp, always smiling, always choosing his words the way a card shark chooses his seat. He came one August afternoon with a handshake and a proposition. He wanted to buy Eduardo's grain supply for the season. The price he offered was fair, and Eduardo, whose English was good but not perfect, agreed verbally on the spot. "So we got a deal on the whole lot?" Hurst asked, spreading his arms wide. "Shay, the whole lot $300, Eduardo said, nodding. What Eduardo meant was $300 per ton. What Hurst walked away claiming was $300 total for every last thing on that trailer. The grain, the trailer itself, and by his twisted interpretation, the 2 horses tied to the fence post nearby. When Eduardo protested, Hurst called his lawyer. Within a week, papers were drawn up citing the verbal agreement witnessed by Hurst's own ranch hand. Eduardo was left with an empty barn, no horses, and a humiliation so deep he stopped speaking at dinner for a month. Rosa watched her father shrink. That was the part she couldn't forgive. She didn't cry, she planned. Rosa had always been sharper than people expected. Quick with numbers, quicker with people. She had a gift for reading a room, and an even better gift for becoming whatever that room needed her to be. By September, she had cut her long hair short, borrowed her cousin's old work boots, and walked straight into the Hurst ranch with a resume that listed 3 years of cattle experience she genuinely had growing up. Clayton Hurst barely looked at her. He needed seasonal help and she looked capable enough. "You start Monday," he said. "Minimum wage, long hours." "Yes, sir," Rosa said, and smiled. The first month she did nothing but work, hard, quietly, and well. She fed animals, fixed fences, and kept her eyes open. She learned which horses Hurst prized above everything. She learned that his prize stallion, a black quarter horse named Midnight, was worth somewhere close to $12,000 and was set to compete at the Beaumont County Fair in October. She also learned that Hurst kept his important documents in an unlocked filing cabinet in the barn office. Old-fashioned man, old-fashioned habits. The second month, Rosa made friends with the county agricultural inspector who came for a routine visit. She mentioned almost accidentally that she'd noticed some irregular branding marks on a few of the newer cattle. Marks that didn't quite match the registered brand on file. She said it with wide, innocent eyes. Just thought someone should know. The inspector came back 3 days later with backup. 3 of those cattle turned out to have a very complicated ownership history. Nothing was proven against Hurst directly, but the investigation meant paperwork, delays, and most importantly, distraction. During that distraction, Rosa found the original verbal agreement that Hurst's ranch hand had witnessed. Except the ranch hand, a quiet older man named Pete, had never actually believed the agreement was legitimate. He'd signed because Hurst told him to. When Rosa sat with Pete one evening and laid everything out plainly, what Hurst had done to her father, how wrong it was, Pete looked at the ground for a long time. "I got a grandson your age," he finally said. Pete agreed to give a written statement to the county magistrate. The Beaumont County Fair arrived on a bright Friday in October. Half the county showed up. Ranchers, families, local press, the mayor. It was the kind of event where reputations were made and broken over nothing more than a blue ribbon and a crowd. Rosa had already quietly tipped off a local journalist about the disputed cattle ownership and the original deal with Eduardo Delgado, including Pete's new statement. The journalist showed up with a notepad and very specific questions. When Clayton Hurst stood in front of the crowd to present Midnight before the equestrian competition, the journalist was right there. The questions came fast in public. Hurst's face went from tan to scarlet in about 30 seconds. He stumbled over his words. The same smooth tongue that had cheated her father now tripping over itself in front of everyone who mattered to him. By Monday, Hearst's lawyer had called Eduardo's lawyer. Eduardo now had won. Paid for by a community fundraiser Rosa had quietly organized. The settlement returned the horses, provided fair compensation for the grain, and included a formal written apology. Rosa drove home that evening with the windows down and the radio loud. Her father was sitting on the porch when she pulled up. He looked at her for a long moment. This daughter who had walked into the lion's den with nothing but patience and a sharp mind. He didn't ask what she'd done or how. He just stood up, put his arms around her and held on. Some things don't need explaining. Justice has a feeling all its own.